we have a nice good old viability rankings thread update for NU now. This is, of course, right before we get June tier shifts, so maybe there's some changes to the tier that end up being notable enough to make this less accurate than we would like. But since it's only going to be drops from RU, pretty unlikely. I'm going to talk about these changes, though. We've got a lot of ones. I'm going to talk as well about the meta at large, because I think that's always useful. You know, whenever we do these, I try to make sure that y'all leave smarter than you came into the video. So, you've been enjoying the content, you enjoy these informative style videos like this, do make sure that you drop a like down there and subscribe if you're not already subscribed. I'm on my way to hitting 10k subs by the end of the year, but of course, you right there that's not subscribed, I need your help. Go mosey on down there. Press that little button. Helps out a lot. Now, something I want to talk about before we even get into the VR. I want to just make a note about all the way up here, S rank, and I want to talk about Mienshao and Flygon, and even to an extent Crocodile, but mostly this first two. In our vote, we actually had a lot of people saying Flygon should be S rank and Mienshao should drop. And we even had some people go so far as to say that Flygon may be the best mon in the tier over Slowbro. Now, I think it's actually pretty interesting as a take. I think a big reason for it is Flygon's set versatility has really been on full display as of late. It really is a mon that you cannot go wrong with. It fits on literally every playstyle. Good user GXC made a good post about it where he's like, yeah, I mean, you could use this mon literally anywhere, even stall. You know, it's not going to be the best stall option because you're probably preferring different ground types, different levitators, different fire resists. But it's not like it's a mon you can't justify. And otherwise, you've got Scale Shot, Dragon Dance stuff popping off, whether it's pure DD Sweeper or if it's the Stealth Rock variant. Bandit is a great wall breaker. Scarf remains one of the better speed control options in NU. And when you look at all of our wall breakers, Flygon checks them all quite well. You got it checking Lycanroc, it checks Magnezone, checks Gallade, Lucario. It even checks the Sun Dudes technically because at least you resist fire. Now, of course, if Scovillain does the Terrifier overheat, you will die in one hit, but you'll have a Flamethrower, which is something Mienshao can't do. And Mienshao, on the other hand, I think people aren't as high on it now. We'll talk more about this mon later, but the rise of Talonflame, I believe, has really contributed to that. I've talked about this a bit in the past, but I feel like Xiao is a lot more hard pressured than Flygon by that Talonflame plus Slowbro core that you'll see pretty commonly on balances, or even just Talon plus Plume. It basically makes every turn just the worst thing ever for Xiao, because it's always using contact moves. At least something like Flygon has Scale Shot and Earthquake as like options it can fall back on, so when it's wall breaking, or even just trying to chunk for damage, it doesn't run that risk of hitting into bad passive effects like Mienshao so commonly does when it's just trying to throw off CCs. And you can even go as far as to talk about how, in terms of common Terra types, Mienshao's going to run into a lot more fighting resistant or even just immune, if you want to look at Ghost, Terra types than Flygon will in terms of like ground resistant or immune Terra types. So just something to think about right now. We could very well, by the end of this next month, see Flygon in S and Mienshao straight up drop. I didn't vote that way this time around, but I did vote for a Mienshao drop, so there you go. Now, new additions to the VR. You're going to see that basically all of this is related to weather. Literally all of these are weather related. So you see Ditto, talk about the surge in HO. This is mostly a surge of weather, if we're honest, although we have seen a lot of those lead Lycanroc Dusk Hyper Offense variants as well. We've seen a lot of weather. You can, of course, copy Swift Swim or Chlorophyll and then just outspeed the Weather Sweeper, which is really good if you're Ditto. The only real weather build, or not weather build, the only real HO build that Ditto's not good into, or at least not as good, gonna be those terrain builds, because you have to play a little bit more cognizant of Hitmonlee and Grafaiai. Like, those are two very common sweepers on terrain offense, and you don't copy Unburden like they... How do I word that? You don't get that Unburden benefit, even when you copy their, like Sword Dance boost. So, my Hitmonlee's still going to be faster than your Ditto, and I'm just going to CC you and you're going to die. Of course, you still copy the other sweepers, so like if there's an Oricorio, or like a Raichu Alola, maybe if you're talking about electric terrain. Yeah, you'll be fine there. But generally, every other offense build, and even a lot of mons on that terrain build, you'll still be able to exploit. I don't want to say that we're in a hyper offense meta, but of course it'd be naive to say that hyper offense is not at a strong point right now. So Ditto, incredible choice. Yama gets put in C. Mon's kind of dog shit, but I think the idea is that it has thick fat, so it's a sun check. Like you could do Terra Dragon Yama or something with bulk up maybe. I don't know. I have absolutely no clue why this got put in C. I think Snorlax is probably just going to be better if you want to cope, because you even get Heat Crash with Lax, which I think is a lot more intuitive when you're talking about trying to beat up Sun. But that's just me. Lilligant in B, of course, this is a Sun abuser. Fits pretty well as a third Chlorophyll option alongside Scovillain and Venusaur. You've seen a lot of Terra Fairy Lilligant with Quiver Dance. Grass move, usually Giga Drain, and then Weather Ball. And in Grass Fire Fairy coverage is, I think, perfect coverage for the context of Inyu. Because obviously we don't have like a Heatran here. I guess it's like Rotom Heat is like the one thing you're kind of worried about. And Talon. Right. Fire types. Those are a problem. But most of the fire types, you're not really that worried about. Something like Talonflame, you're just trying to overwhelm it anyway, so it kind of plays into your overall game plan. But there. Ludicolo and Hisuian Quillfish is, of course, are both going to be your rain options. Basculegion as well is going to play into the team, but these two help signify the rise of rain being really, really good. Ludicolo is nice as well because, as Phantom says here, it's a tertiary setter. So the way you want to build rain right now is you're going to have two dedicated setters most of the time. Going to be like Tornadus. I've got a team in my builder, but I don't feel like opening PS. But you got like Tornadus. Some people run both genies. So you'll have Prankster Torn plus Prankster Thunderous. Sometimes you'll see Prankster Klefki for Rain Dance, because you also get some spikes with it, so that could be really good. But you're going to still want that third setter a lot of the time. And so Ludicolo plays into that. And it often is just nice synergistically with the other Rain Mons, because most of them are physical. Think about how Hisuian Quillfish and Basculegion are most often the other Rain Sweepers on the team. So Ludicolo has a good offensive synergy there too. Hisuian Quill, of course, put on here too. It honestly is surprisingly strong for a mon of its BST. So when you get the Swords Dance boosts, it's pretty good. Of course, he's no Quilliam. Quilliam, big overquill, shouts to him. But is still a pretty good option. Or Scovillain all the way up to A. Some people think Scovillain is actually the reason that Sun teams are overpowered. I mean, look, you look at the Terrafire calcs when you're under Sun. Scovillain kinda just one-shots almost everything in the tier with Overheat. Now, of course, Overheat means you're gonna drop a lot of momentum, but often teams don't have a forcing enough move that they can make after you Overheat. I feel like really the best that they have is DD Flygon as an option with Scale Shot, or even like Scale Shot Crook. Those are really the best, and I'm gonna say really the only somewhat consistent mons that can try and exploit Scovillain's special attack drop, because I think a lot of other mons don't threaten Sun teams as hard. And there's probably mons that I'm forgetting off the dome, but you're trying to think about forcing setup sweepers, and like, so I say Scale Shot Crit because you can Terra Dragon versus it, and then you're gonna like beat it down. Something like Mew I don't feel like's good enough, because Overheat's still gonna do a ton to you, even when you're facing a -2 villain. Lycan Dusk isn't like the most enticing, because it's hard to still set up, because we've actually seen Life Orb Scovillain get some extra usage lately. And that's just gonna Solar Beam you as you try to SD. Cloyster, obviously that mon's not really counting here. Lucario doesn't really count here either. Kind of like look through the mons. I guess tying up Incineroar if you're looking at SD Incin just a wall break. Gator as well, but Gator's another one of those mons where you're like, it has to be Specs villain. It's just an incredibly good wall breaker. And as you've seen in the videos where I use Sun, it's really easy to just get mileage out of this. And in my view, very hard to punish. I only voted to A. We did have a couple people go to A+. Also think it's so funny it went from unrank all the way to here. I think A plus is definitely fair. The only reason I didn't push for that hard in my vote is I do think the limits that we just talked about are significant enough to hold it back from A plus. And I don't think Scovillain on its own should be A plus above Ninetales. Now, if you vote Ninetales up to A plus as well, sure. I think then you can put Venusaur, Ninetales, and Scovillain all in the same tier. But I don't think that it's breaking Sun to the degree you can justify putting it above Tails. And it's literally only good under Sun, so I think it has to always be, at best, the same sub-rank as Tails. Peach? Oh, and last one, Torn. I actually kind of like Tornadus, even when I'm just using it for the utility stuff. I think Rain Dance, Taunt, Hurricane Weather Ball is actually pretty good with Terra Ground. I really liked using that. It's a pretty decent option into Sticky Web. Galvantula a lot of the time is running Sticky Web, Thunder, T-Wave, and then like Bug Buzz. So you can go for Terra Ground turn 1 and taunt it. And even if they go for their, what's it called? Their Bug Buzz to two-shot you. I mean, it's risky to Bug Buzz anyway because you can't necessarily predict the Terra. But two, you're still going to get your Rain, and you're still going to then be able to break their Sash with like your next Mon. And Galv shouldn't be able to one-shot it. Also, yeah, I was watching this game. Shoutouts to The Franklin. So many random comments there. But Tornado is really good Mon. Of course, it's a bit of a merchant of Rain being good, but is what it is, man. Then we get to the Rises. Big Zoner rising up. Magnezone, I believe, at this point is like very, very obviously the best Steel type. A lot of it just comes down to how hard it is to switch around. The tier doesn't have common and good switch-ins to its stab types. Like, we don't lack them, right? We've got things like Kurt and Gastro. We've got Rotom Heat. We've got Rotom Mow even. Like, Rotom Mow is a pretty decent mod. But they don't really keep up as well as you'd like. And a lot of these are pretty niche in the context of, like, overall Inu. So Zone is frequently just kind of able to free fire, even if you're just running Assault Vest Magnezone. It's going to be able to get a lot of mileage. And of course, AV's really nice right now in the context of current Inu, because Sun teams, and even Rain teams to a degree, don't appreciate running into Terra Dragon Magnezone. It's not that they can't break it, it's just that it's a good enough inhibitor to those builds, to where it's a negative matchup, I would say, overall, for those offense archetypes. And then this doesn't even talk about, like, Spec Zone being an absolute bitch and a half to try to play around. Terra Blast Grass even removing some of the potential counterplay when you look at the more, like, true walls to its dual stab is very, very good. We've got Mew going up to A+. Most of this becomes from weakness policy picking up a lot of usage on Mew. We've seen that be the adaptation as of late, and you still run, like, the Draining Kiss, Earth Power stuff, and you'll also see Psychic Noise now more. It's a pretty good way, I would say, to maximize Mew threat, because now, when you see those Mienshous try and just go for those little twiddly-dink U-turns, they're not nearly as impactful of a play. You still have to play around the Mew Terrastalize the next turn. It can get really hard really quickly, because again, Mew gets that one Draining Kiss up. Well, now it's +4 just out of nowhere. That's going to be really hard to deal with. And it's still, of course, super, super versatile as well. You still have offensive rocker sets with Meteor Beam. You still have got the super bulky Double Dance sets with Stored Power Draining Kiss. You still got physical Mew as well that can just throw every single check for a loop and kind of just dunk on them. It's pretty tough, pretty tough. Talonflame goes up to A+. Just like Phantomir says, it's rising right back up to Gen 8 Inu levels of notoriety. A lot of this, too, is people don't love Noivern as much. We've kind of realized that a lot of those defog Noivern sets are very exploitable. You either run max HP, and you become a little bulkier at the cost of now doing like 3 damage every time you attack. And if you run Hurricane, you're walled by freaking Bramblegast of all mons. So that's no good. Or you're on offensive, you're still not that strong. And you still are really, really exploitable once you Draco special attack drop. Worst of all, though, you're not a fighting resist. Things like Luke, Mienshao, even Nape, they really, really pressure you hard. And it puts you even at that much more risk of getting dropped by, like, Shao's Stone Edge. So, we've just seen, for that reason, Talonflame assert itself at the top. Really good defogger. I think it helps as well when you look at the common stealth rockers right now, it's things like Flygon and Crocodile. And while these aren't necessarily positive matchups for Talonflame, they're a lot better than like when Diancie is hard meta. Diancie's kind of falling out of the meta right now. Rhyperior, even though it's at A rank, it's not really that common. I think it's more people just understand how good Rhyperior is. And I mean, things like even like Pert, they're just not seen. So all those bad matchups that you commonly see for Talonflame, it doesn't really have to worry about them at all. So definitely a succeeding mon right now. Very, very nice. I love it a lot. I went from really not being a huge fan of Talon at one point in the meta and being a Noivern spammer to literally the opposite. Lucario up to A as well. I've been preaching this for quite some time now, so this is just kind of, you know, oh, it was due. I think it helps that when you look at your common fighting checks, things like Talonflame just die to E-Speed. Vileplume can't really touch you, so you're free to boost as much as you need. Sylveon, of course, is not a check to you. Lorgus is not a check to you. Noivern, it just doesn't do enough damage to you, really. We've also seen the adaptation of Lumberry Luke as well, which is pretty cool because now if Talonflame tries to rely on Burn to check you, because we do see a lot of Terra Poison Talon instead of Terra Ghost, well, that's not actually helping you anymore. And you can go Adamant and you still get a lot of the good matchups that Lucario wants. So, really good mon. Venusaur up to A. I'm not going to really expand on this too much. It's just, again, Sun teams are put in A. Venusaur, Scoville, and Ninetales is like the core you will see on 99.9% of Sun. Good growth sweeper, good breaker, supported well by things like Revival Blessing, Healing Wish. Solid mon. Plume goes up to A as well. I think it's been a slow riser for a while. I had been supporting this mon like 2 months ago when Danny told me that it was unviable trash and defensive Venusaur was better. I remembered. Don't think you're not slick, honey. You're not slick. And so we finally see it go up. I think a lot of this too. It's helpful that Bro is, I don't want to say Bro's fallen off at all because it hasn't, but, well, it has, but it's not like fallen off the map. But Plume is able to find a little bit more room, I would argue, because Bro is at least marginally less good. It's still just about as good at checking things like Flygon, Crook, Duskrock. And I think this also plays into the whole point about Shao earlier, where Slowbro is a lot easier to Momentum Vortex punish compared to Plume. Because again, you got Effect Spore Plume. Whereas with Bro, it's like, you might have a helmet, but I can knock that off. And then it's like, now you're just literally seeding momentum. It's a big reason why Slowbro's not ban worthy, by the way. You get, I'm getting an NUPL podcast call from my phone. I'm not answering that right now. But yeah, I mean, that's really all I got to say about it. It plays really nicely into what we talked about earlier with the Talonflame core, just how you punish those pivots really, really, really conveniently. Very solid. Incineroar up to A-. I love this mon. Absolutely phenomenal wall breaker. Good defensive value in a Sun meta. Good Terra types as well to bother your common checks. I want to try some Terra Flying on it eventually. I just think that'd be pretty fun. You get both the ground immunity and the fire resistant one, but normally I'm just going fairy right now. But this mon's really good at breaking things like Talonflame, which is really important in this meta. Of course, it obliterates Plume. Slowbro is like perpetually in fear of what Incin's gonna do to it. It's just very good. Been good for a while too. It even checks things like Shandy and Hisui type, which is nice. Ninetales to A. Sun is good. Pom Pom to A-. It went really unused for a while, but people are back again realizing, oh wow, Oricorio Pom Pom is broken as hell. It's just really easy to win with the bulky set. Like, very, very easy to win. With Rev Dance, Ground, Hurricane, your coverage is basically all you need it to be. The only thing that limits Pom Pom is, since the bulky set's kind of what you're forced to run, because otherwise you frankly just take too much damage when setting up, you are a little bit slow to really get threatening. You need 2 boosts a lot of the time to feel safe. And even at +2, since it so commonly runs very minimal speed invest, it's actually still slower than a majority of the Scarfers in NU. So things like, you know, Infernape can still get a switcheroo off on you and not ruin your sweep, but make it a lot less consistent. Shao could still threaten you with like crit Stone Edge, or even just Stone Edge in general to try to put you in range of something else. If you've got like a Lycanroc Dusk with a Celerock in the back, you might be able to be picked off by that. It's definitely a really good mon still. We'll see how much higher up it's able to be pushed. Sylveon to A-. Yeah, I mean, Spec Sylve is still really good. I feel like this might be the point where Sylveon just starts bouncing between B+ and A-. It's also worth noting, of course, that Calm Mind Sylveon's actually, I believe, pretty decent right now, with the Steel types being at a bit of a low point outside of Zone, which you can frankly just set up on. And in addition to that, Protect is super valuable in a weather meta. So yeah. Basky Legion to A-, it could probably go higher. Legion is really, really good right now because of rain. And with all the water immunities basically being absent from the tier, Wave Crash under Sun, not... yeah, Wave Crash under Sun, guys. I'm inventing the meta. You think you know the meta? Bitch, I am the meta. But yeah, Legion under Rain is really, really unfair. Large part because all of those water means like Gastro and Vaporeon are just so absent from the metagame right now. It's very easy to break. You don't really have to worry about those matchups where you feel hard-walled. And frankly, like Terra Blast Ghost, it's really good still on those sets. But when you're under Rain, you don't really even need it because Slowbro's taking so much from Wave Crash. Florg goes up. I think Florg is basically just a more versatile Sylveon. At the cost, though, of having a lot worse physical bulk. But yeah, you've got Scarf sets are pretty decent. Specs can be still okay. Calm Mind is, I think, a little better on Florgus as well, because you have Synthesis. So it's easier to get Terra Blast coverage. You can get Moonblast, Terra Blast, Ground, CM, Synth, and it's just quite strong. I think it's a mon you definitely should try out if you've not tried it already. Even Psychic Noise, like Phantom says here, it's not bad. I don't really like it, but it's decent. Inteleon rising a bit. Scarf has actually seen quite a lot of usage as of late because it's just so damn fast. It's really hard to account for Scarf Inteleon. The mon is hitting like 550 damn near speed. So all these weather sweepers, they can't go neutral speed or they are outrun by Mr. Lizard. But even like Specs, even like Mystic Water or Boots, whatever item you want to run that's not Specs, still pretty decent. Just because they're really sick pivots. Nice mon right now. I'm still not a huge fan of it, but it's definitely picking up in potency. Then we got Rotom Heat. I really just don't care about Rotom Heat, but it's okay into Sun. You tank a hit from Villain, you overheat it. Same with like Venusaur if it's not +2, and even then you still have Terra stuff to potentially make Venusaur's life hell. It's really all there is. Belly Bolt, pretty decent, what's it called? Pretty decent weather check. Just because Terra Dragon is like really pretty easy to do on it. It's another one of those mons that, again, how we talked about Plume and Talon earlier, just really good at bothering these pivots of Inu, while also potentially being a pivot itself. You just get that slow Volt Switch, support things like Lycanroc Dusk, Banded Flygon, Life Orb Shao, all done very nicely. Dreadnought goes up. I'm not really a fan of Dreadnought at all, but yeah, I mean, it can go on Rain decently. It can be run on HO. It's okay. Yeah, okay, Phantom is tweaking. Tenta's great. I think Tenta will rise if anything. Kingdra, anyhow. My bad for getting distracted. Kingdra, yeah, Specs Kingdra under Rain is still incredible. Who'd have thought? I mean, again, when you don't have those common water immunities being run anymore, it's really, really easy to get mileage out of a mon like Kingdra, where you're just gonna spam your Specs Weather Balls under Rain and just brute force progress. Draco as well is honestly kind of free right now in Inu, like we talked about earlier. There's not really steel types getting a ton of usage. You may run it like a DNC. But you think that's switching on your Drake? No. And if we want to look as well at a lot of the defensive staples of Inu and why Kingdra could be so good. I mean, how many special walls are there truly up here? Like AV Zone, I guess? AV Glade? Alolan Muck? AV Rioni? It's just not really something I'm moved by. So, pretty easy to break with. Like I said, with Tentacruel, I think the spawn's actually quite good right now. Also takes a massive dump on Vileplume, which is always good. Decent amount of versatility. You got options like Flip, Knock, Toxic Spikes. You've got Haze. Protect is fine if you want to go Toxic. There's just a lot that it can do. And I feel like it's kind of an underrated utility pick. It definitely lets you go with some alt builds. Like offbeat builds, maybe a better word to use there. Umbreon Rise is once again, it's a protect user in a meta with weather. What's maybe more important with Umbreon is I think naturally Terra Dragon ends up being really good on it because its mixed bulk is a lot better than Vaporeon's and Sylveon's. And so you can use it to stunt on both weathers, even as like an actual switch into certain mons. It's a great punisher as well of Vileplume, not Vileplume. Technically sure, but Venusaur, because you got Foul Play. So when Venusaur growths up, it actually has to worry about Umbreon doing a million back to it. And then we have Vapo rising to B. I don't really know if Vaporeon needed to rise to B. I just instead decided not to drop it with my vote. But yeah, it's in a meta with a ton of rain now. Vaporeon is pretty reasonable. It's a good switch into Scovillain's fire move spamming nonsense. It's a fine mon. And once again, just like Umbreon, just like Sylveon, the protect user with Wish. So it's going to naturally have some pretty decent value in this type of meta. Then we go up to the drops. And a lot of these I feel like are pretty just obvious drops that aren't going to be too surprising. So we might go by these pretty quickly. It's like Alolan Muck. This is a HO favored meta. So it's kind of hard for a mon like Alolan Muck to really find footing. It's a mon that's going to excel in slower paced metas where balance is dominant. Because it's going to test those balance builds. People are really bad about building overly passive balances. And Alolan Muck feasts on those because those teams just can't get by it. So it has plenty of turns to throw knockoffs at everything, get poisons, and just be a general hindrance. Right now, though, it doesn't really do that. There's not really a ton of stuff that it's actively walling all too well. It'll be better later, but for now, it's pretty mid, I'd say. Serena, we see a huge drop for. And I don't even think it's really got anything to do with 4 move slot syndrome. I think with Serena, it's just, again, it's the offense issue of Serena really just doesn't do much this meta. Talonflame, of course, being prevalent is not good. But it's like, I don't feel like in battles I want to waste turns spitting with Serena. Even though I get that huge speed boost, and now I outspeed a lot of stuff, I still feel fast enough. It's not very bulky, and if I run bulky sets, so many things exploit it. It's basically just gonna be a momentum sink right now, I feel. Brambleghast drops, kind of same issues as Serena. I do think CB Bramble is a pretty valid pick, but otherwise it's like offensive spin. I mean, I don't really feel sold by that a lot of the time, especially as Incineroar picks up in usage. It's got a negative sun matchup. It's got a negative rain matchup, even though it's a defensive grass. Because it's, well, even though it's a grass that can be run defensively, it doesn't actually check rain really well at all. There's not really a lot of reason to use it outside of, I believe, purely wall breaker oriented sets. And that's only going to carry so far. Diancie drops. This is actually one, no. This is a drop I actually don't understand. I think Diancie is like actually so good in this meta. You just run Terra Dragon and you stunt on all the weathers. And stunt is in quotes because they could definitely overwhelm you. You don't have longevity of your own. But with Wish Passers being good again, it's frankly not that hard to fit on teams. And I think the offensive sets, especially OTR, or even just Rock Polish if you want to go that direction, I believe they're really solid on Diancie too. Especially as the steel types are falling off. Like, what are we doing? We are moving Diancie down in a metagame where it doesn't have to deal with Copper Raja Registeel on every team. It can just Meteor Beam, break the hell out of everything. You think I'm scared of a freaking Magnezone, dude? Come on. Galv drops. I actually voted to drop Galvantula, but that's only because I think Smeargle is a very valid pick for a web setter. I still think Galv's better, but I don't believe that it's worth keeping an A- now if there's something else. Now you could argue it's still worth having Galv an A- if you think Webs is that good. And I still think Webs is really good in NU. Like, it has taken a backseat compared to Weather, but it's also like pretty good into weather. It's very easy to get your web up if they're not running Espeon, and even if they are, still not that hard to get your web up. You literally need to win like 150-50, bug buzz the Espeon on a switch in, it's forced out with eject button, and then win another 50-50 there if it wants to come back in, and you'll have your Sash intact. Through all this, you'll get the web up and you're fine. Meanwhile, Rain has minimal response outside of the Tornado sequence that I had to brute force several times in a live once. So I think webs are still quite good into weather. It's just, right now, weather's the flavor of the month. So, happens. Noivern drops, all the reasons I outlined earlier. I'm not going to reiterate those. Registeel drops. I think Iron Defense Body Press is actually really decent on it. But otherwise, this Bond kind of just sits around doing very little, which is not the greatest. Quag drops. It's not really capable of stopping the current offense builds that you see. Like setup spam, HO generally still beats Quag. Like every traditional offense beats Quag. So not a very good mon. Avalugg hasn't been good in months at this point. I think we were just still rating it kind of highly because we were, frankly, still huffing the fumes of prime Avalugg meta. So rip to him. Gastrodon drops. It's frankly a worse version of Vaporeon and a worse version of Pert if I had to make any kind of comparison, where a lot of its defensive profile is mirrored by those two. But Vapo's going to be better for the water immunity role because it isn't a complete momentum sink. It can run flip. It also still gets Scald, which is pretty major. Whereas with Pert, it's just... Pert does a little bit more, I would say, as a water ground. It's a better Lycanroc check as well. So there you go. Scrafty, yeah, I can't even put into words why Scrafty's bad. I think genuinely, I mean, it's just that Terra doesn't save it because it's still not strong enough nor fast enough if you're DD, and Bulk Up is kind of just always dealing with issues of getting overwhelmed. I feel like it's just kind of a power level in you thing. It's not a bad mon. It just consistently seems to come up short. And then we had some unranks. I think Dura is just kind of a matter of why use it when you could use Zone. Minior, why use it when you could use any other Shell Smasher. And then Horse, again, same thing. There's just better mons to use. So yeah, though, this is our VR now. I hope y'all enjoyed the update coverage. Tomorrow, I mean, we'll get tier shifts, so maybe there will be a tier shifts video. In theory, there will be. But, hey, appreciate all the support. Catch y'all next time. Peace.